In our previous episode, we asked whether the American century is evolving or entering a new phase in a changing global order. We examined how the post-1945 system, built largely under U.S. leadership, is facing structural transformation. But global systems do not change in isolation. They change because other powers rise within them. And in that discussion, one country stood at the center of the debate: China. Is China simply rising within the existing international order? Or is it operating on a civilizational time horizon that fundamentally changes the strategic equation? Because if one century is evolving, another model may already be emerging. Before we continue, please subscribe, like, and share this channel for research-driven geopolitical analysis that connects history, strategy, and global power. This is episode 2 of our 5-part global power arc. And today, we examine not just China's growth, but China's strategic identity. Most modern states emerged after the Peace of Westphalia in 1648. The Westphalian system emphasized fixed borders, sovereignty, legal equality among states, national identity tied to territory. This framework shaped Europe and eventually much of the world. China's historical development followed a different trajectory. For thousands of years, political authority in China was tied not only to territory, but to cultural legitimacy and civilizational continuity. The very term Zhongguo, commonly translated as Middle Kingdom, reflects not simply geography, but worldview. Historically, rulers claimed authority through the mandate of heaven, a concept suggesting legitimacy was moral and civilizational, not merely territorial. This distinction matters, because how a country defines itself influences how it behaves strategically. China has experienced repeated dynastic collapse, yet something deeper persisted. Major dynasties such as Han Dynasty, Tang Dynasty, Ming Dynasty, Qing Dynasty rose, declined, and were replaced. But despite political fragmentation, the written language endured, bureaucratic administration endured, cultural identity endured, centralized governance traditions endured. Even foreign conquerors, Mongols in the 13th century and Manchus in the 17th century, adopted Chinese administrative systems rather than dismantling them. Conquest changed rulers. It did not erase civilizational structure. This creates what scholars often call strategic memory. A civilization that has collapsed and reunified repeatedly does not necessarily fear temporary instability the same way younger states might. For over 2 millennia, Chinese governance was deeply influenced by the teachings of Confucius. Key principles included merit-based administration, social harmony, hierarchical responsibility, moral legitimacy of leadership. The imperial examination system selected officials through competitive testing, an early institutional mechanism designed to create administrative continuity. This produced a strong bureaucratic tradition capable of governing vast populations over long time horizons. Modern China's structured 5-year plans and industrial policies reflect, in part, this long tradition of centralized administrative planning. Whether one supports or critiques the current system, its institutional culture differs from systems driven primarily by short electoral cycles. The time horizon matters. Between the mid-19th and mid-20th centuries, China experienced a period often described domestically as the Century of Humiliation. This era included the Opium Wars, unequal treaties, territorial concessions, internal rebellion, foreign invasion. This period deeply influenced modern strategic thinking. Contemporary policy emphasis on sovereignty, territorial integrity, technological self-reliance, military modernization cannot be fully understood without acknowledging this historical memory. Strategic culture is often shaped less by triumph and more by trauma. Today, China speaks frequently of national rejuvenation. Major initiatives such as the Belt and Road Initiative aim to expand economic connectivity across Asia, Africa, Europe, and beyond. Domestically, long-term planning emphasizes advanced manufacturing, artificial intelligence, semiconductor development, high-speed rail infrastructure, urban modernization. These initiatives are framed not simply as economic growth, but as restoration of historical status. The strategic narrative often extends beyond decades. It references centuries. Let's pause here. Do you think China's modern strategy is primarily A. Economic modernization, B. Civilizational restoration, C. Security-driven positioning, D. A combination of all three? Comment your perspective below. In our next episode on multipolar balance, we'll highlight one of the most insightful responses. Western liberal democracies often emphasize electoral accountability, policy flexibility, individual rights. China's governance emphasizes stability, continuity, long-term national planning. These differences do not automatically determine outcomes, but misunderstanding them can lead to miscalculation. If one side measures success in election cycles and the other measures it in generational shifts, strategic expectations diverge. China operates within the modern international order. It participates in global institutions. It engages in global trade. It negotiates within international frameworks. Institutionally, it is a modern state. But historically and rhetorically, it often frames its trajectory as civilizational renewal. This dual identity, modern state, civilizational memory, makes its strategic posture uniquely complex. So, what is China? A country pretending to be a civilization? Or a civilization operating within the modern state system? The evidence suggests something more nuanced. China functions institutionally as a modern state, but its strategic thinking is deeply informed by civilizational continuity. This does not imply inevitable dominance. It does not imply inevitable conflict. It implies that understanding China requires historical depth, not only contemporary political analysis. And as global power structures evolve, identity will matter as much as economics. In Episode 1, we examine systemic evolution. In Episode 2, we examine strategic identity. In Episode 3, we zoom out further. If multiple powers operate with different historical memories and planning horizons, what does a true multipolar world actually look like? Stable balance, competitive blocks, or structural instability? The architecture of global power is changing, and we are only beginning to understand what comes next. If you haven't watched Episode 1 yet, I recommend starting there. The foundation of this arc begins with understanding the system itself.